like another kid threw a coin at me and said, "Dirty Jew, stingy Jew, pick up the coin." It was in the toilet like area, and I wasn't going to pick it up.
My guest today is Eli Goldsmith, also known as the Midnight Rabbi. Eli is a rabbi, podcaster, musician, and the brain behind Unity Bookings, a global entertainment promotion. Eli, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. Very nice to see you, Ellie. But happy we share a good name.
Yes, Eli to Eli, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, yeah.
So first of all, as I mentioned, they call you the Midnight Rabbi, which is a very cool sort of alias. You sound like you belong in some sort of Jewish cowboy film. What is that about? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, it's funny you said that, cowboy, because when you write Midnight Rabbi, it always comes up first, Midnight Cowboy. So
Yeah, very different
yeah.
film.
But if you write my English name, Eli Goldsmith, it does actually come up Midnight Rabbi. And the way I got the name was from the students themselves. And that for me is the biggest honor, that I was out on the streets, the at-risk community, late at night, and being there with those boys, seeing them go through their struggles. And the boys themselves said, when they created an email for me, because I was really offline in those days, we're talking about, the 2008, 9, 10, those kind of years. I was taking a break from being online and just focusing on my spiritual journey and helping others in terms of teaching and that, and creating events. So I really wasn't on the online. I had other people do it for me. But they decided to create an email for me, and they called it Midnight Rabbi. That was at Gmail or whatever. I don't know if it still exists, the actual email, but the name definitely exists, and a lot of other brands that came off it online.
But why Midnight Rabbi? Because am I right in thinking that this has to do with that you would study at midnight
That's the point.
specifically?
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
late night shift, and that was my insight to the world of at-risk teenagers in Israel, in Jerusalem specifically. I went to the head of the institutes and said, "Look, most of your kids are out on the street at midnight, literally, and that's where their main energy and life force is coming from. And you all are not there, and you're all ready for them in the daytime, early in the morning, throughout the day. And I want to be the person to be there for them." They didn't have like counselors or like they call it Abba in Hebrew, which means someone like who takes care of the campus, a family kind of employed for that purpose. But the missing point is there was no actual teachers or staff other than that limited, skeleton crew. And I felt that was the best time to access these boys, and it really became a success for those many years, to the point where I even had some interest from Tel Aviv and high tech, entrepreneurs who want social entrepreneurs who wanted to create it into like an official Midnight Rabbi position, like that other people could be trained in. Now it didn't happen for whatever reason. I think Madoff came along though during those years and made off with a lot of the sponsorship, and it was a little bit of a challenging time financially. So I ended up just being a normal bloke and getting a job. But up until then, that was my ideal position, because what I did is I followed up in the afternoon with a music class and studio access. So when they'd wake up again by 4 5, I was there till 7 8, and then I'd go off again, maybe sleep for an hour, and come back at midnight. And I was literally up all night. And some places I even travelled on the last bus just to be on their campus, and I was there till the first bus in the morning.
My God. So really, this goes beyond educating people. This actually sort of veers into maybe being some sort of a mentor and a counselor in some ways.
Yeah, it really was. It was really with a mission that people like I resonate with what you guys are doing. That there's a certain urgency, and the street culture, if you don't get the attention you need, which unfortunately I've seen the results, you can end up, especially the last few years, it's gone crazy. The suicide rate and the overdose rate. The pandemic they talked about they didn't really name it right. I think it was really a pandemic of opioids and other things that really was getting most of the population the mental health issues. So I knew that being there late at night for these kids who are away from home, this is where I need to be. And it was an idealistic hope to save their lives. And many boys I'm still connected with, happily married, or even if they're still going through hard times, but they're still in touch. And thank God I've had a lot of good news. And as we say in Jewish, a lot of nachas.
Yes, well, I think that's absolutely amazing work that you're doing in Israel. You're not actually from Israel. We're actually from the same place. We're both Eli from Edgware.
Yeah, yeah.
What was life like growing up for you there?
Yeah, so I would never imagine this is what I would be doing, at that time of my life in my mid 20s or something. I grew up in late 20s, 30s. I grew up in London, in Edgware, a North London boy, and Northwest London, I'd add.
Very nice.
And, the Goldsmith family were pretty well known. And thank God I had the good fortune, and we'll get into a little bit, I assume, but of being in like the concert world, VIP, Royal Box. That was my upbringing. Live Aid already at 5, 6 years old, sitting there seeing Prince Charles and Princess Diana not a few rows away from me, and celebrating that day. It was actually my brother's bar mitzvah as well, I think. So it was
Wow.
a very significant day in the Goldsmith family that my uncle had put it together with Bob Geldof. My father had done all the promotion. Both my brothers are now, involved in the business, and that they're carrying on my father's business. And I thought I'd, on some level, continue that legacy here in Israel. But the idea of growing up in Edgware, North London, traditional Jew, didn't really understand what it meant to be Jewish. Honestly, that was my big question that came on later on in life. And I just was part of the crowd. I went to a state school. I was, probably one of the only Jews in my year. And I think that was interesting, divine providence, that I had the blessing to meet all kinds of people and not be, significantly, inclined towards any culture, any people. And it gave me an open mindedness, which has actually helped me a lot nowadays that I'm online on trying to, educate and help and be involved with all kinds of people, not just the Jewish people.
Yeah. You mentioned that you attended sort of the local state school, and I also happen to know, we've spoken a bit. You've had your fair share of unfortunately nasty anti-Semitic experiences. If you're comfortable doing so, would you mind elaborating on that a bit?
Yeah, no, I'm totally comfortable. The state school system, it was a blessing, as I said, because I got to meet all kinds of people and cultures, and learn the hard, see really what people go through, from the council estate to to kids who lived in nicer homes. I mean, even the kid that lived in the nicer home that I used to go visit, I funny enough went back for a Shabbat visit with my wife's family, and I was staying. They lived in his old house, and the police came, knocked on the door the one time I'm there for that one weekend, and were looking for him. And because he hadn't been there for a bunch of years, and they were chasing, and he was from the best of homes. So I can't imagine what happened to the rest of these guys. I mean, literally, it was rough and tough, and I got beaten up a few times for sure. Now, was it coming from an anti-Semitic place? Sometimes, yes. What was strange is I wasn't so aware. Like, I'd come home and say to my mum, boy told me I can't eat ham, and I'd be like, am I not allowed to eat ham? She, no, you're Jewish, you don't eat ham. I was like, all right. So it was like pretty ignorant, but at the same time, like, another kid threw a coin at me and said, "Dirty Jew, stingy Jew, pick up the coin." It was in the toilet like area, and I wasn't going to pick it up, but he was just being rude. I, funny enough, noticed that boy years later. I actually went to one of his cousins' home, and he was there, and I was a bit scared of him. And then later on, I saw him in Baskin Robbins beating up a lot of my friends, and they all were obviously Jewish. So, definitely there was that thread
Wow.
and that wake up call. Wait a minute, why is this happening? Why are they pointing me out? Like, I was in Collindale Park one time with all my friends from school, and at that point I was still very close with all my state school friends, even though I transitioned to a private school, which gave me a lot, sort of as they say, a little push up in terms of the system. And but I was still, I was dressed maybe a bit nicer, maybe I stood out in that sense. But a whole group of other guys came and with bricks and knives, and basically threatened my friends if they don't back off, they're going to do something to them. And they proceeded to beat me up, like big time. So it was a little bit rough, Edgware, Burnt Oak, Colindale, those kind of areas. In those days, the council estate in Edgware was much, different than it is now. When I go back to Edgware, it's all been, I don't know all the correct names, but they basically moved everything to a higher level in terms of standard and quality of building, and even the school, Edgware schools, on a whole nother level in terms of the investment they put into there. So, I hope the people have been taken care of, but the infrastructure looks like it's improved a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been absolutely terrifying. Were you able to tell teachers or people in positions of authority or anything?
Yeah, that was interesting. I was a teenager by that point, young teenager, and I just didn't look to authority as a place. I did one time get mugged, where I had a mug in David, and they put a cigarette. I'd hidden it when I saw them, and when I put the cigarette, almost they saw me move it, and they saw the gold. They ripped it off, and I called the police. But that was one of the only times I ever called police on someone, and they were all waiting outside the Camden police station to beat me up afterwards. So it was pretty scary what was going on, and we had to identify them. And it wasn't the kind of thing I really wanted to go through on a nice Saturday
Of
afternoon.
course.
Instead of being a nice being in a shul or doing something more Jewish, I was out there in Camden going through that kind of horrible experience. But yeah, I think it was all wake-up calls, honestly. It kept pushing me and saying, why am I different? Why am I Jewish? What does this mean to me? And that became the big question. It was a life-changing question that, as you can see, like even externally, I've gone on a journey.
Absolutely. And this is actually something I have found to be a common theme through talking to people, that people will undergo anti-Semitic experiences. And rather than make them want to be less Jewish, it actually pushes them towards Judaism, to questioning why this is happening and to thinking, okay, let's actually explore my identity a bit more, which is ironically the opposite of what anti-Semites want.
Yeah, well, I would add on to that the school system also helps, because if you go through all of history, I don't know if it's still the same, the curriculum, but when I was there, that was my favorite subject, and I really took note of history. And by the time we got to the climax of the educational curriculum of history in A levels, what was the point? After all of history went through, the Greeks, the Romans, all the way through till Industrial Revolution, go through everything, and we're at the climax of my education in the English school system, and what's it talk about? The Holocaust, and as a result of the Second World War and everything that went on, and that was my first time encountering my own people in history, and it was basically showing them to be very weak and victimized, and it was a very low part of our history, probably the lowest, and that was my introduction. Here's my people in the history books, and this is what they're going through. It was never discussion of the greatness of the Jewish people and what we contributed, to society. There was never any mention of any of the biblical times when we had temples and had our own empire and had tremendous influence in the world throughout all of history. None of that was ever mentioned. Just this nebby, subjugated people being bullied around and eventually killed in the millions. So that really woke me up. Like, what am I part of this people that have this interesting history? There must be more to it than just, because I saw with my own eyes how successful Jewish people are. In London, we were very much involved in, the management side in the music world, especially, and seeing the success we've had in that. And then, you look around and you see, every person in Hollywood somewhere is either Jewish or, influenced by Jewish people. They go to bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. Everybody knows we're around. And it started to, open up with that big question.
Yeah. You mentioned there, I mean, Jews being successful in the music industry, and as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, you come from a family of promoters. Like, notably, you are
Yeah,
the son of the legendary Harvey Goldsmith,
yeah,
CVE,
yeah.
huge promoter for live
So I
events.
just make a correction. Harvey is my uncle.
Apologies.
He's my dad's younger brother. My father, who stayed out the limelight, but they worked together all that time as well, was Martin. And
Right.
Martin, it was the one doing all the merchandise, and he was there just as much as Harvey. Just Harvey, that was his brand. Harvey
Yeah.
Goldsmith Entertainments, whereas my father's event merchandising, which is he didn't put his name there.
Yeah, but
Wasn't
it's a
his thing.
family run a
Yeah.
family-run thing, which I really like. What was that like for you growing up? Because you must have rubbed shoulders with some pretty impressive figures.
Yeah, so I'm happy you mention it. It definitely gave me some popularity. Also, I've just made a list here, just some of the names that I remember. Hacksaw Jim Duggan came to my bar mitzvah, which is very cool.
Wow.
Picked up my grandma, a little lady, little Jewish Polish, I don't know Polish, but a little Jewish lady on his shoulders and screaming USA. That was fun. I mean, I was a big Spurs fan, so I would have preferred a few Tottenham players, but my dad was in the business, so that's who he brought. And Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And then I went on a tour to the US with them in Pittsburgh. I was by a big WWF event back then, so I got to meet them all. I specifically remember that giant sumo wrestler, Yoko Oma, I think.
Yokozuna.
Yokozuna, that's it.
Yeah.
And, my dad actually was quite close with Hulk Hogan. He calls him his holy brother.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I myself am a big fan of WWE and formerly
Yeah,
WWF.
yeah.
I'm incredibly jealous that Hacksaw Jim Duggan was at your bar mitzvah. You must have been the most popular
Yeah,
kid.
he's a really, really nice guy. Like, really, really, they're all actually really lovely when you're with them. There were one or two psychos. I remember on that Pittsburgh tour in America, one of the guys, I think the voodoo guy, went a bit nuts, so they had to sort of kick him out because he wasn't just crazy in the ring; he was crazy outside as well.
Right.
And one of the stories my dad told me, that sumo guy, he got stuck in the toilet and the whole thing started breaking and it was a whole
Mm,
mess. There's always big stories on the tours. And I grew up with those kind of stories because it wasn't just the wrestling, it was the music world and hearing about Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and the biggest acts around, going backstage VIP, meeting Eric Clapton and Slash and
mm,
Noam from Oasis in the 90s, when there was the new generation of musicians and meeting all those guys and working at those festivals. I worked at Ozfest with Ozzy Osbourne and all those guys,
wow.
and it was a very interesting, profound experience, especially for a teenager who loved music so much.
Yeah.
And I felt very blessed in that way, and my friends appreciated it also.
My God, you must have had some incredible experiences. I mean, Led Zeppelin, for God's sakes, what was that like?
Well, Led Zeppelin, the way it worked out for me, I wasn't actually so into them, honestly. But there was a funny story that when they made a reunion concert with them, Harvey and was, I think, a major point in bringing that together. And my dad and Harvey were the keys to getting the last remaining tickets. So there was a nice guy out there in New York, a guy called Jeff Palver, who wanted to get a ticket and couldn't get them because they were sold out pretty much. But through my family, he'd try his luck. He actually just brought Black Eyed Peas to Jerusalem for a Jerusalem Rocks event. So he was
Okay.
he'd heard about my family. And my dad pretty much said to him, "You want to get to me, you got to go to meet my son when you're in Israel next." So he came to Israel, met with me in the old city, even though he wanted me to come to Tel Aviv. I said, "I'm not doing that." So he came to the old city, literally handed me his credit card and said, I heard you work with these at-risk teenagers. And in the merit of Led Zeppelin, I ended up kitting out a full studio of music instruments and creating a concert that year that was about 900 kids and kept many of the kids off the streets because they used that studio equipment. And there's still some guy using it to teach drums, and unfortunately a lot of it ended up after a few years getting nicked, as we say in England, by one of the kids who sold it for drugs. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to monitor all the equipment over the years, but initially it was an amazing help and created some great things.
Wow, that's amazing. Now you are yourself a musician, and I'm assuming all of these experiences when you were younger will have influenced this in some way. I mean, in your youth, you even won a competition or two. Who are you? That's how I do my research. Who are you a
Yeah.
fan of musically?
So yeah, that competition was a good one. That ended up in the JC, of course,
Of
and
course.
that crew of guys I'm still best friends with, and I was just at one of their weddings in Amsterdam. It was amazing, and I actually helped with the music there. Funny enough, so there's a continuation in the story. But in terms of who are my big influences, back in the day, I would say all the legends. Like it's obvious, like people like Bob Marley and Jimi Hendrix, and my dad was a big jazz hippie, so I got to hear all the greats in that sense. From hearing like the top musicians in the world, like Eric Clapton, I met him and myself, but being able to go to his live events and sit in the Royal Box or Royal Albert Hall or anything like that, or Lenny
Wow.
Kravitz and Jamiroquai, Stevie Wonder, everybody. I mean, I must have seen all the greats: Michael Jackson, Prince, anybody and everyone. Guns N' Roses. I met Slash. Got different they were all big influences. But during the 90s, I got really into the grunge movement and hip hop. That was what was big then, Beastie Boys and Snoop Dogg, and then that helped me get into the hip hop world. Tribe Called Quest, started to refine my taste a little bit with the hip hop music. And in terms of the rock, there's big stuff out there. I don't know. It's hard to go through who were my favorite, but I would say the top influence band on me in the 90s was Radiohead and Alice in Chains. I think those two. And I just think that Radiohead just opened my mind up. I mean, maybe I was doing a bit too much drugs in those days as well, the combination. But it just opened up my mind to that there was something more to life than the 9 to 5, corporate job, and it made me help in my search for more meaning.
Yeah, absolutely. And this sort of search for meaning, in a way, it's a very sort of Jewish thing to search for more meaning, to want to know what else is out there, is it not?
I think so, and I think that thankfully the Jewish world, as with all the different criticisms, and I'd rather focus on the good, especially publicly, unless we want to do something practical about it. But on a praise to us that we had all these tours that everyone went on around 16, and that made a profound effect on me because I'd never been to Israel, never been to the Holy Land, and coming here at 16 was like wow. And I came away with like this feeling like I was missing something. I felt empty when I came back. I didn't feel like I was really fully home once I'd gone there. At first, I thought it's because it was the whole social vibe and the whole energy of being on tour. But I think inside, I knew that I was missing something. I wasn't there anymore, and I made it back there during my university days, and I really was there now to search.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, listen, you want to talk about the power of music? We both know that there are artists out there right now who are actually fighting anti-Semitism through their art. For example, the rapper Westside Gravy, who he raps about anti-Semitic tropes in a very clever, effective way. There's the also not a musician, but the comedian and former podcast guest Eli Gold, who uses his comedy as a vehicle to bring attention to neo-Nazis in the United States. I just love it when artists of any genre use their talent to raise awareness of this issue. Do you think art and entertainment can be used as an effective way to combat anti-Semitism?
Yeah, saving lives. That's what it is, really. And you take that festival, the Comedy Chosen Fest. We have Elon Gold there, and Modi and other guys, and then Nissan Black, thank God, was booked there. Not directly through I was involved in it, and then Moshe Reuven, who was your past guest, also amazing episode here alongside Elon Gold as well. That's actually what really I was like, wow, this is a serious podcast. So, but I have to introduce my people to this. But always looking for good content online, and it's so important. And you're doing that, and that's what opens me up to want to really push for good quality media and art, music, creative energy. We have it in us, and there are loads and loads of youth. My original concept was music for the youth. Like, we have to create a youth movement in the Jewish world and empower musicians and creative avenues, and not just leave it to the general music industry. We have to have a little bit more control, like independence, so that they don't end up in a not good situation from the music industry influence, either financially or drug wise. We want to protect our own people, make sure they're in a good place. So that's obviously at the top of the list. We've seen that the music industry does destroy its own stars, unfortunately. And that's something which I was very concerned about. And I was very happy to hear recently on a visit, a group of people came to my current work right now, and they were all in the top LA scene, and I've been speaking with them actually since then. And one of the points they mentioned that they actually now have a movement of concern and bunch management and the industry to actually look after the musicians, which you'd think would be obvious. But if you look at the recent Elvis movie, it was not obvious.
Yeah.
And that's just one example of many where the main concern in the management, like my dad used to tell me, was making sure they had their hit of drugs. That's what he needed to take care of,
Wow.
and not really giving them the tools to be role models, to live a healthy lifestyle, and to be people that you'd look up to. And that's where we can really make a difference. If we have those kind of personalities taken care of and given the correct guidance in terms of lifestyle, then with the talent and the creative flow. And Joe Rogan always makes a point. I listen to his podcast a lot. That the drugs and the vibe, the whole lifestyle is part of the whole creative energy, and there is something to that. I'm not going to deny it, but I would suggest that we can do better than that. As a Jewish people, in terms of having a standard and not just doing whatever we feel like, and then from that sort of endless, overflowing creative vibe produce amazing art. It can also come with a very, focused a way of living that doesn't have to deny the creative flow.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and we are definitely seeing that in this new generation of proud Jewish artists. I mean, you've named Nissim Black, there's Moshe Reuven, of course, Westside Gravy, there's Kosher Dills, like all of these new young Jewish artists who actually have quite a wholesome image as well, without sort of being lame about it, which I think is some of the concern about those people who say it's about the drugs, it's about the vibe, and without that, what is there? It's like, no, there's actually this new generation who connect with the youth. It's plain to see, and they're proud about being Jewish, and they do speak out about anti-Semitism, and it's very effective.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the more we give tools and strengthen that side of the industry in terms of our own people investing in it, we can really make a difference. If I had ability, I would be doing large scale events already. My dream was to do a Unity concert in the whole world, and the way we do Unity events would create a platform for everybody to perform globally, like what happened in Live Aid, through the streaming tools they had in those days, satellite, etc. Nowadays, it would be much easier to do that. I don't even know if we'd have to Concord Phil Collins. I think we could figure out even quicker ways of getting everybody connected. And it's a different world we're in, and the opportunity is there. Obviously, the technology is still not at the level of in-person experience, but it is a work in process. So I do still have a vision of creating a global Unity concert, and if anyone would have an issue with it, that would show their lack of a unity. They would just show who they are. So that would be the solution to the ones who would be against it. Just
Definitely. I mean, let's get on to that. You are the man behind Unity Inspires projects, which is really sort of an umbrella for a bunch of individual projects as well. That you have promotions, but you also have a podcaster, and that comes under it. Can you talk us a bit about what inspired Unity Inspires?
Yeah, great. I'm happy you went to this, because for me this is what my passion is, because it's been a journey, and I had a vision when I was a student in the university in Sussex, running along the beach there in Brighton. I used to go jogging a lot. Yeah, you wouldn't imagine, actually, pretty good shape back then, and I was running along, and I had a vision of unity, of people together with light and positive and love. And I wasn't on any drugs. I'd actually quit drugs by that point,
Good for you.
made a decision. And, it's a decision. Thankfully, what happened, I lived with a dealer. So he sort of, it was either all or nothing. So I just decided nothing. And I got into very healthy, it went together with my Sabbath or Shabbat observance as well, sort of went together, because then it showed I had the ability to say no to cigarettes and other things. And that running along, I had this vision of unity, and it was very much connected with my journey to Israel that I soon took and had already taken at the beginning of the year in university. And I just knew that there was this mission that we have on a soul level, that it's not enough just for us to become the best people we can be, but we need to also unify with the rest of the world in some way or form. And one of the ways to do that is through music and art and creative platforms. It's a sort of a level of communication that surpasses what general media is busy with, which is the word form, or newspaper that back in those days. Nowadays I suppose it would be Twitter, which is a complete nightmare for Unity, and other such platforms, the social media platforms, or TikTok or something like that. They're not really leading towards a unified path for humanity, and therefore, since there's such a divisive, dystopian, degeneration going on right now, you would just listen to Russell Brand or anyone discussing every single episode, what the F is going on, like every single it's like it's gone nuts. So if
Yeah.
that is where the world's generally heading right now, as a discussion and a focus, so we have to, obviously, as always, all revolutionaries, and I consider myself one, we have to, from the Jewish world, really revolutionize our focus in music and entertainment and unity. And it's something which is all connected. The culture wars is where it's at. And we have to help the youth open up. When I was developing myself, it was during those years through music, and the voice of the musicians had a big influence on me. And I think that nowadays it's just even more so that once you've got your following, an example like NF, if you've ever heard of him, a rapper, yeah, current. We're talking about someone current now, yeah. So he doesn't swear, great, amazing, doesn't use any bad language, and yet he's a top level hip hop artist. And I believe he's on like similar levels to Eminem in terms of quality. Check him out, NF, and his performance is amazing as well. I haven't seen him live, but from what I've seen, another example: 21 Pilots, no swearing, no like focus on. So they obviously have something spiritual. Even like I don't know this band that well, not 21 Pilots, and I'm a big fans of, but there's my kids even introduced. I always like to listen to what the kids. I was just in a car. We took some girls back from a place we stayed the Sabbath, and I asked the girls, "What are you into?" It's important to hear from the kids themselves. What are they into? And that band, I believe, Dragon something. What's it called?
Imagine Dragons.
Yeah. So that band, for example, also the guy has some sort of principles and values. I don't think he's religious or anything, but just he has some principles, and that for me shows that there's hope in the music world to influence the culture. So to come back to me, Unity Inspires projects. What the concept of unity inspires is that unity is the idea, that's the ideal. Inspiration is how we're going to do it, and the projects are just the practical ways of making it happen. Yeah. So the inspiration is what's going to make the change, but it's got to come from a source of unity. And this really is a deep concept. It really goes into the idea of mind or thought, speech, and action. The idea of unity inspires projects. That's the theme behind it. So I wrote a book called United Souls just to explain it. And United Souls really, the goal would be to have many other authors and all these wonderful people you mentioned before, and all those other influencers out there, also speakers. I've worked with speakers as well, Moshe Gersh and Rudy Rochman and Shlomi Zion. You also hear from them themselves how as speaking as well in a way that's communicative and allows for unity. For example, Shlomi Zion has made a lot of unity in the Arab world with the Jewish world because he goes to the Arab countries. And then Rudy Rochman is able to go talk to anyone, doesn't matter who, and open their mind up, even a neo-Nazi, or be able to break through a little bit and show them that there's some sort of errors in their thinking and the way they understand history. He has such a tremendous power to do that.
Such a wealth of talent going on right now. It's so inspiring to see. I actually want to go back to something that you touched upon earlier, which is you are a member of the Breslov branch of Judaism. You're a follower of the Breslov branch of Judaism. And I want to talk about this. If those who don't know, Breslov is a branch of Hasidic Judaism, a movement inspired by the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. For those who may not be familiar with this, what are some of the customs of this movement? And also, am I right in thinking that you came to this a bit later in life? You didn't necessarily grow up in this movement.
Yeah, so obviously growing up in North London, it was United Shul or Reform.
Yeah.
That was far from Breslov. But the point, coming to Israel, I actually went to more what they call yeshiva. And while I was there, I was learning Chabad and Breslov. And my experience in university, I have to give a shout out to the Chabad rabbi there. If it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have got connected because they're on campus providing a service. He actually really wasn't so on campus. He lived next to Chris Eubank, funny enough. And I ended up going there for Shabbos. And I was like, Chris. And he was like, all right, mate. And I was like, you want to come round for a meal? And they wanted to bring him around. They actually had a spare chair, but he was like, no, I'm busy. He was polishing his truck. Literally.
Wow.
He looked, great. Anyway, and we were like in Shabbat mode. But I met this rabbi in university. It was right next to where I was staying on the beach. I decided to be by the beach. I was looking at a more spiritual place, and I didn't want to be on the campus of everyone else. So I managed to find a place. Find out my best friend who I went to the wedding in Amsterdam. It was his hookup got me that place. So everything flows. But the point was, to get back to your question, so that is part of it. It was going into the flow, trying to find that deeper path than the yeshivish path. The yeshiva path was amazing, and I got a lot from it. But learning Chabad and Breslov for me was really where it was at in terms of feeding the soul. I still feel, thank God, that being someone from outside, I didn't grow up with any specific path. That gives me an advantage to be able to absorb all the paths. So to be described as a Breslover, I don't think I've reached that status in the world here of being officially recognized as a Breslov rabbi or Breslov teacher, even though I work for them and I encourage their teachings. I think they're very helpful. I have my own rabbi who's the Tolna Rebbe, who's actually, interestingly, if you trace it back, he goes back to Chernobyl, which were actually against Breslov. So in his shul, they don't have any of the Breslover books in the shul. But for me, it obviously makes no difference. And whenever I ask him, I'm going to Uman this year for Rosh Hashanah, he'd go with a blessing. Just even though it's not his path, but he always blessed me to go and work with that path as well. I just feel that the light of what I'm trying to do in terms of the Unity projects, it does align very well with Breslov and Chabad teachings. And now the general Jewish world is waking up very much in terms of the importance of outreach and connecting to the larger world. And so that's also influenced them as well, I think, to become more open-minded. Artists like Nissim Black, who he himself is a Breslover. So let's just get into a few ideas of Breslov just while we're here.
Please.
So, for example, Nissim Black, who got me to come for my first trip to Uman. So that's a very big part of the Breslov mindset, to go visit Uman Rosh Hashanah. Right now, there's a lot of controversy going on because of what's going on in the Ukraine. And it's obviously a lot of recommendation not to go, but they're such hardcore Hasidim followers that the rabbi said, you go there, you've got more to be afraid of not coming, so they go. And Nissim Black got me there my first year, and then slowly I started working for the rabbi, so I was there with him, part of his institute. But the concept of going to the Rebbe Nachman, was his big answer, that if big advice to fix up the whole year by being by his graveside in Uman. So they endeavor to be there, and sometimes there's thousands and thousands. Before Corona, I think it was coming up to 100,000. Another concept of Breslov that's relevant for everybody is the idea of talking to God, which is what we were talking about with Emuna, is having that relationship with God, which I think everyone in the world nowadays can get inspiration. The whole addiction world, the 12-step movement, everybody knows that, in order to really overcome these addictions, you need to have a higher force, a higher power. You call it what you want, but the point is you have to connect to something beyond yourself to be able to overcome the addictions that are so powerful. And that is a very truthful reality of human existence. And people being able to communicate to that higher power gives them energy and focus and abilities to do things they wouldn't be able to do. So Emuna is really where it's at. It teaches us to do that on a daily level for an hour a day if possible, or whatever amount of time. The main thing is you're doing it daily, talking to God as part of your daily life, not just the prayer service, but as extra. Another concept of midnight rabbi, you call me, but there's also the idea of midnight prayers, to pray at that time of will where things are different in the world. They're meant to be more at peace, even though they're not nowadays. But the concept of praying at those more holier moments. Also mikveh, going into a place of purity, of waters that purify you. These are the kinds of customs that they took on. The main point is it's much to do with inner work. It's not to do with trying to change the world. Chabad is a different kind of vibe. As you know, I'm sure everyone knows who Chabad is. They made a joke that when people start to populate Mars, Chabad will also build a house there. So, that's part. Chabad is everywhere. So
Yeah.
we got to go with that one. But for me, the concept is the ideas behind Chabad, of the Rebbe and his ability to influence the world and build leaders like he did, like Rabbi Sachs, and the many, many thousands of Chabad people out there who are leaders in their communities and changing the communities. Whenever we travel, Nissim Black, one of the first things we're going to get is a Chabad rabbi hosting us, and not just like whatever hosting, like amazing hosting of love and bringing us into their community and giving us opportunity to connect with their people. And if it's become, you have the idea of a tour circuit, so you have all the major promoters. So I would say in the Jewish world, Chabad is like the kings of the tour circuit for the Jewish world.
Wow.
You know.
I want to go back to something you mentioned. One of the concepts of Breslov is Emuna, and you said that if to spend an hour a day carrying this out, what does that look like? Would that be would people could they relate that to meditation? Is it more prayer based? What does that look like?
Well, I think those kind of questions are going to be amazing to ask someone like Nissim Black, because he's really a big spokesman on this concept. I present it. I'm an MC for it in terms of bringing those kind of personalities, but I don't feel comfortable because I once again, as I said, I'm very varied in my approach to Judaism, and I don't feel comfortable pushing it like as the path, or living it up to it, what the rabbi is asking. So, but it definitely, what it does do is it centers you every day. It impacts your life with serenity. It gives you tranquility because you cleanse yourself an hour a day. Not only do you go through all the things you need to clean off, but you also now hand your life over to a bigger force. So you're not in control, and that I mean, the whole anxiety, the world of anxiety nowadays and mental illness would in itself have, obviously there's going to need professionals, etc., etc., but it in itself is a massive tool to relieve a lot of the tendencies towards that through people learning and developing a relationship with themselves and a higher force, that they don't need to control the world around them, that the world itself will go to where it needs to go. You need to do what you need to do, and that's by turning to the higher force and tuning into your real essence. And then you can do that mission in the world once you're tuned into that inner part of yourself. The way I would discuss it personally, without quoting others, is the concept of soul. You have to tune more into the soul level. That's my focus. United soul concept, that we are all souls. We need to unify as souls. We need to learn the language of the soul. And one of those ways is through the meditation on Emuna, Hespodidus process of talking to God.
Mm. Wow, that's such an interesting sort of holistic way of looking at things. Um, would you say there are any challenges that your community is facing right now? And if so, what needs to be done about them?
Yeah, so challenge wise, it's not really my position once again to discuss the problems in the Jewish world, because there definitely are. It's pretty, the media do a great job finding all that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
it's pretty much already been said. What I would say is that rather we have to, as a people, be more proactive and dealing with solutions to those clear issues. Um, One of them, obviously, is building better financial systems to help the larger infrastructure work better and more honest and more straight. And one of the things is, once again, to bring those values of the soul, which is where do all the values come? I'd love to say, I'd love to get on Joe Rogan's pod and say to him, mate, you always talk about how much you love all your fellow comedians and you give them platform and you do all these amazing things for all these people, but where does it come from? And I'll say, I just love people. Where does love come from? Where do these feelings of need to connect to another person come from? And that is the soul level. That is the soul level that the world is not really discussing. And one of the points that I want to do on a global level and really work hard on, get very much a viral concept, is hashtag Anti-Soulism. There already is anti-Semitism. That go on Twitter, trending is anti-Semitism almost every day, and then that's where you guys are. Anti-soulism, the idea of the soul level, is something which we have to focus in on as a people. And the more we do, the more we go into the inner aspect of who we are as people. And music, where does it come from? The soul, and the creative aspects and the art and all these talented speakers, they're speaking from the soul. That's why they're so meaningful. Once we start to source it in that level, then we start to understand, wait a minute, we're not just human, like physical, we're not just emotional, we're spiritual. And that will change everything. For example, the technological revolution going on right now, they have no answers. There's Tristan Harris trying this, humane technology and the social dilemma, and they're trying to fight with this overwhelming, increased social media experience, and they don't know how to deal with it. It's affecting kids en mass, mass suicide. Like, it's not just like a small issue; it's a massive issue. It's affecting, body esteem on every single level of society. People are affected now by this technological. We're all attached to our phones, and what's next? So I'm trying to at least create much more of an awareness. And I know, thank God, there are amazing rabbis and teachers and rebbitzins and all kinds of people like yourself who are a little bit more searching, or maybe in a big way searching, or in their lifestyle, like we said, Chabad, every day bringing the soul to their community, putting their soul out there, expressing the soul without getting into any of the political stuff, just on a daily individual level. All of us can be more soulful. more kind, more loving. These are all aspects of the soul.
If you can sort of just give, and I'm not asking you as a representative of Breslov Judaism, just as you, Eli Goldsmith, if you can
Yeah,
give, uh,
appreciate that. I don't feel I'm worthy of Breslov Judaism anyway. Like I'm part of it, but not, if you know what I mean.
Can you give like one tip for how people can be more soulful in their day-to-day lives that they can apply?
Yeah, I think one, it's very cool to just get out the labels of society. That in itself would just do us all a good job. Try to just really like tune into the fact that you're a soul. Once again, you mentioned about prayer service. I think prayer is a very important thing. Meditation, mindfulness, whatever way you call it. I think acting more godly, becoming more godly, thinking about being aware that you have an influence in your life and what you do influences the people around you, and therefore you should try and make it the most positive influence and the most uplifting influence. You should try, as humankind can, but like in a real way, in a daily way, to be a nicer father in my situation, a nicer husband, a more caring, more empathetic. There is enough wisdom, enough good people out there, enough good voices. Like, you go through your podcast list of who you listen to, make sure they're good influences. If they're not, filter them. If they're a bit, risque, work out how to tune into the good parts of them. Same with all the YouTube stuff. Same with all the Netflix. If you waste your time on that, whatever it maybe, don't waste your time on it. Live a better, more active life and less online. Like, try to filter out all the noise and all the nonsense and all the distraction. Tune into a more soulful experience of life, a more meaningful experience of life. And if you look at the really, truly successful people out there, they're doing it. Whether they're doing it in the name of religion doesn't make a difference. They're doing it.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to ask you a question which I ask all of our guests, which is, if someone says to you, look, I don't know loads about anti-Semitism, I don't even know loads about Judaism, but I want to help in the fight against anti-Semitism, what can I do?
Well, I think one of the things that people need to do more daily is share this kind of content. It upsets me. I spend hours every week putting out content, and I see one or two good people take the time to share it. Majority are scared to share it. Not just that, they're scared to like it. They're scared to even comment on it, even have it near them. That is a problem. We need to be able to say, look, I don't always have time to create this content. Like our friend Ellie here and myself and other people, I've made time to create this content. That means I made an active choice to not maybe work in a normal company to do this. Not everyone has that ability. Okay, so therefore, what they do have is they have, as Stephen Covey wisely talks about, their sphere of influence, and that sphere of influence they can impact through liking, sharing, putting, introducing to others, talking about it themselves. Once in a while, even having the courage to even make a live feed. It's so easy now. Just pick up a phone and make a little blurb about what you feel about this situation. For us to just be passive is a massive mistake. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said you have to be an active participant in life. You can't just watch. You can't just be constantly taking in content or like consumers. It's a whole consumer culture. We have to change the culture. This is the culture wars, and we have to start becoming active. It doesn't matter, Jewish, not Jewish, it doesn't make any difference. The point is there has to be activism of people who are bringing soul concepts to the world and healthy lifestyles. It has to be done proactively. It has to start becoming impacting the business level, impacting the relationship. And that means each of us individually every day practically need to like and share a few times a day something of meaning and purpose that can bring some light to the internet experience, to your WhatsApp group, to your TikTok flow. Yeah, I personally, when I go to TikTok, I don't even go on it. I just put content on there. I don't even want to go on it because the second I'm on it, usually it's craziness. Yeah, here and there, thank God that my feed is actually pretty decent, but you can curate your feeds a little bit. But sometimes with TikTok, it's like it's just out of your control. So just become more of an influencer and less of a consumer. Give over more. You listen when you're listening, listen, but you have to be able to listen to the other side and be able to see the bigger picture. But the point is that you have to also, when you're listening, become an active listener where it actually affects you and brings about positive change. That's the point. That was the idea. Unity inspires projects. The thought, the ideal of unity, that humankind should be unified, united souls. Speak it out, make it into reality, get everyone into the concept of unity, and build projects, build concerts, events, podcasts, media apps, everything, whatever you can do online to change the culture that people, the new generation, are being brought up with an opportunity to become soulful people, even with technology.
Eli, before I let you go, please tell the listeners, where can people find you?
So I'm at Unity Inspires Projects. Very easy way to remember. It's on Instagram. It's still a pretty new page, so it needs a lot more following and sharing. And it's, I would love it to get unstuck in terms of its ability to affect people. All the musicians I work with, I'm connected with, like on their platforms here and there. They'll share my stories or whatever on our Instagram. It's very likely I'll be again on tour with Nissim. Our last Hanukkah was in the UK with Nissim in Manchester and London. Easy to find online. Just write Eli Goldsmith Midnight Rabbi on all the different platforms. I'm pretty active on everywhere. I believe we have to be. And as I said, it's a matter of now, people like us doing this work, we need everyone else to make it grow, to expand it. And it's up to you guys listening to make it happen.
Definitely. Eli Goldsmith, the Midnight Rabbi. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for coming on Podcast Against Anti-Semitism.
Pleasure. It should be successful. Campaign against anti-Semitism, and you specifically, should be successful, and we should see a change in the discussion online towards the good.